the point just to sort of say here to get going in terms of what we're going to talk about, as Andrew said, with client listening is in some respects not a new subject. So I figured I'd start with kind of very quickly what it is in terms of how we see it, why it's important, why the firms that we work with are implementing new things because of the impact to them. Talk about some sort of old ways, new ways of doing it, project-led versus always on, and then try and make this very actionable in terms of looking at steps you can take, opportunities you can take to implement more effective client listening, because obviously this is a journey, and then leave plenty of time at the end for questions and for discussions. But also more than that, please, if you've got a question along the way, just jump in, come off mute, and ask it and start the conversation there. So I'm very happy to kind of ad lib around and sort of pick up questions if you've got examples or where areas where you're doing this or where you've run into these challenges, whatever else. Please share them because I'm sure they'll be valuable to everyone else. So let's try and make it more of an interactive conversation. So please just jump in along the way. Okay, so probably helpful just to do a little bit on me in terms of, why is Paul here talking about client listening? So my background has been around how do you use data to improve customer experience and then ultimately to drive business growth. And I've done that through a range of different industries. I've been in financial services, branding, consulting. I did sort of .com startups back in the day. And now I'm the CEO of My Customer Lens, which is an always-on client listening platform specifically for professional services. And also along the way, I've jumped around. I haven't covered all of the countries we've got here today, but I have been working in the US a bit, in Australia and New Zealand, and therefore sort of seen the similarities and the differences across different industries along the way. So with that perspective, I thought I'd turn this on its head and actually start with defining client listening by what it's not. So these are sort of three things that I hear and I get pushed back on. So the first thing I get is client listening is old news. It's been around for a long time. We've all heard about it. We've all talked about it. Been there, done that, move on, tell me something new, particularly in this wonderful age of AI and generative AI and all these exciting things that are going on. Client listening seems very dull and boring. My argument to that is if you think of client listening as old news, and I suspect that the people on here don't see it that way, otherwise you wouldn't have come along for the conversation, it's probably because you're doing it the old way. So if you haven't moved on, it's a bit like saying, video recorders are old news because you're still on Betamax and you're not moving on into DVDs and Netflix and streaming and everything else. So I say the first pushback around old news is it probably just means you're still doing it the old way. The second one I get is it's not necessary. We've all heard the phrase, I know my clients. We don't need to do any more client listening. I know my clients. It's a common phrase. I get it across legal firms, consulting firms, accountants that I get to talk to. And the trouble with that is I know my clients makes two assumptions. Firstly, it assumes that the person working with the client is asking them all the right questions that the firm needs to know, not just that they need to know individually. And secondly, it assumes that the firm doesn't actually need to know anything that they're not sharing with the firm. And so I know my clients is great. That's not a bad thing. And we certainly don't want anything that would mean fee earners don't know their clients as well individually. But where firms need to get to is this sense of, but also we know our clients collectively. So when people sort of push back on the unnecessary, that's for me where I go. And then the third one, just more general around feedback. So people hear feedback and they assume that it's probably going to be preceded by constructive and followed by some kind of monologue about why they're not getting what they thought they were going to get or haven't achieved what they wanted to get. And so just as humans, we naturally worry about feedback and kind of go, oh, this isn't going to be good. We assume it's negative. And actually that's far from the case, but it's often a reason why people push back from client listening. So if those are some of the things it's not, then what is it? To me, client listening is how professional services firms measure the strength of their individual and collective relationships by gathering signals from current and prospective clients. Now, I'd probably take that a stage further and go, well, actually, the good client listening firms are also gathering signals from their referrers and their stakeholders and their individual staff, but that started getting a very long, wordy description for a slide. So we'll keep it to current prospective clients for the minute. So I think the key thing is here, and back to some of the earlier points, it's about individual and collective relationships. So it's about understanding the relationship that the client has with the firm, with the brand, with the overall delivery, as well as individual projects and individual people that they might be interacting with. And then the other bit, I've kind of used the word there's signals rather than feedback. And we'll get into that a bit more. But actually, when we start thinking in terms of signals, it sort of takes away that negative connotation of feedback, and just signals is just pieces of information. It's not necessarily good or bad. But also then it starts to broaden the mind around where you can get this from. And it doesn't have to be direct feedback. It can be conversations. It can be changes in operational data and those sorts of things. It can be third-party data as well as market data as well as client feedback. So I'll build on that. But the idea is it's about individual and collective, and it's about signals, and it's about more than just the clients you've got at the minute. So if we're starting to stretch that that definition, then the question becomes, well, why do we want to do that? We're busy. We've got lots of things to do. Nobody's kicking around looking for more work. So why would we want to listen to clients? Why would we potentially want to do this more effectively? That sounds like more work. So for me, the benefits of that fall under three things. So firstly, it's about how you help the firm individually and collectively to strengthen client relationships. So how do you then do that to improve the client experience, improve onboarding processes, maybe deliver new products that meet the evolving needs so you stay relevant to clients. And so you can just sort of strengthen that level of engagement. Following on from that, then it's about also strengthening reputation. So again, individually and collectively, I think it was Jeff Bezos that defined brand as the things that people say about you when you're not in the room. And for me, that's where reputation goes, because it's part of brand. And it's that sense of, well, if we're delivering better customer experiences, then we get more testimonials. It's easier to get testimonials. We get more unsolicited testimonials. Our word of mouth expands, and all of a sudden people aren't just saying, I like that firm, they're really good, the people are friendly. They're talking about the broader client experience. They're starting to talk about your differentiated value to other people, which therefore makes for a much stronger referral, much stronger word of mouth. And then ultimately, the bottom line. So how does it then drive revenue? Well, it drives revenue because if you've got a stronger understanding of evolving client needs, it puts you at the front of the queue when you're trying to win additional pieces of work. When they've got discretionary work, so we work with firms that are on panels and their client works with half a dozen different firms, but when they've got a new piece of work coming up, they've got to make a choice about who do I want to go with? Who do I want to bring that to? Who's going to be easy to work with? Who's going to do this the way I need it to be done? And that ultimately then drives discretionary revenue. It means that if you've built the right products, all of a sudden you're increasing revenue streams without having to deliver more services. It means you can price differently. So all of a sudden, I've just been quoted in a book that's just been published about value-based pricing and the ongoing debate amongst law firms around, do we price on 6-minute intervals? Do we price on the value we deliver to firms? Well, the more you listen to clients, the more you understand the value you deliver to them, and it becomes easier not to have a race to the bottom, but rather to hold your premium pricing or even to be at a price on value. I'll just sort of pause briefly and check there. Did anyone want to come in on any of those points? Agree, disagree? Disagreeing is always fun. Makes it more interesting for people. Just checking. No, all happy for me to carry on? Okay, cool. So to me, the whole idea of client listening comes down to, it's a bit like the New Year's resolutions that we all make and don't necessarily keep through. That we know that doing client listening is a good thing. It's inherently a good thing. I haven't found anyone that's argued that listening to clients is a bad thing. But the trouble is, as other priorities come in, it keeps sliding down the importance list, and it's something to be done a little bit later, a little bit later. So it's a bit like when we go to the gym and we're only buying a week's worth of gym, and then we know we're going to come back next year. And it's the same with clients. It ends up becoming this periodic, we do it once a year, or that was really hard work, it was complicated, let's now park that for a while. I heard a great phrase from a firm I was talking to a while back that said, yeah, we do client visiting, we do an annual survey. Well, I say it's annual. We haven't actually done it this year because it's just getting a bit too hard to get everyone together. But in theory, it's annual, but we actually do it about every 2 or 3 years. And that's the challenge. We've got this disconnect. Everyone thinks it's a good idea, but it somehow slides off the execution to-do list. So what I thought I'd do was just build the case for not just why you should do it better, but also how you can do it more effectively by looking back and going, well, what are the perils? What's the problems with the current way of doing it, the traditional way of doing it, so that we can then start to think about building the case for a different, more effective way of doing it. So I've kind of described this current way, the traditional way of client listening, as being sort of project-based or project-led. And the reason for that is the first challenge we see is that, just we talked about before, it becomes a project. Client listening is a project, and therefore it happens at set times. So it might be that people do end of project survey, so end of matter if you're lawyers, end of projects for accountants. And so it only happens once the work is done. Or you might do relationship interviews or a relationship survey that, interviews can't be done for everyone, so that tends to just be done for key accounts. So you've got this sort of point in time dip in, but of course the relationships are continuous. Even if it's just a piece of work, it's still continuous through that process. And for the larger clients, of course, that are doing various projects on retainers and things, it's a 365 relationship. And so we did some research last year around the future of client listening. And one of the things we asked firms, this was legal and accounting firms, when do you collect feedback? And only 7% said, well, we collect it after the onboarding process, where we kind of check in, what are your initial expectations? Have we met them? So basically no one's doing that. Only a third said we're collecting some form of feedback throughout the project. So while we're doing the work, only a third of firms are actually checking in and going, how's it working? And then 73% said, well, once it's completed, then we'll do something. It might be completed as in a project, might be a relationship. So you've still got 27% of firms that did the survey. Now, there was nobody in the survey that said they did no client listening. So there are a bunch of firms that aren't even picking up some feedback at the end. But of course, at that point, it's too late. You can't do anything about it at that point. Clients know you can't do anything about it. It's too late. And and therefore the depth of insights you get aren't terribly rich. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge builds on from that, is that this project-based sort of research mindset approach to client listening means you get very siloed data. So you do a end of project survey, you then get a report, a nice PowerPoint report that says, this is what the survey told us. And then you've probably got a spreadsheet. And then every time you do that, you've got different spreadsheets, different PowerPoints. If you do some interviews, same thing. You do the interviews, you analyze the interviews, you report on the interviews. So it's all very siloed. And the research we talked about before, 46% of firms, so the top answer when we said, where is this feedback being stored? The top answer was, it's in individual files. So it's in PowerPoints, it's in spreadsheets, it's in individual Word documents of transcripts, which is fine, it's digital, but it's really hard for anyone to be able to pull that together, to analyze it, and then to tell a story about what clients are saying. And of course, even if you do that, it's a very manual process. And then it very quickly becomes out of date. Then, of course, you've got the other bit, that all this informal feedback is just getting stuck in individual people's notes. So the second top answer, and this was my favorite stat, was that 42% of firms said, well, the feedback is in people's heads and notebooks. And of course, that's the trouble, is we then sit around in meetings and we go, what do our clients think? And people are pulling out all of these answers, but only they know them. And it's based on what they've heard, what they've assumed, what they've written down. Nobody else can see it. And therefore, you've got these sort of conflicting tensions about what we think clients might like, what they need, how things are evolving, what we think is a good and bad experience, and all the rest of it. So you can't even digitize that. And so other parts of the survey just talked about this frustration. We just can't get people to share what they are hearing because we've got nowhere to put it. So that's the second problem, it's silos. And then the third problem with this sort of project-led approach is that it's firm-centric rather than client-centric. So what we're getting at here is often when it becomes a project, all of a sudden the design of the survey tends to have lots of people inputting into it because it's an important thing. We only do this once a year, therefore we need to understand. And what tends to happen is questions get asked based on what partners, teams want to know rather than what clients want to tell you. And then when that comes back, it doesn't tend to get shared very widely because it's very specific to individuals and teams and partners and the rest of it. So when we asked this question here about just where does the feedback go? How widely does it go? And you can see there 59% of firms said it's basically not going any further than the relevant team. And so that's great for the team, but what the firm isn't doing, the firm's not learning about that. It's not able to take action more broadly based on what its clients are telling it. And only 41% said to some degree, it's actually starting to prompt action across the firm. So I think there's a huge opportunity there to start going, well, if we start thinking about this from the client's perspective, what are they trying to tell us? Then all of a sudden you go, well, if they're trying to tell us that, then the whole firm needs to know that so that we can do something with it. So, and then my final point is the challenge that feedback has become an opt-in process. And so we often hear the sort of, it's just not the right time to ask for feedback from my client. And there are some very legitimate reasons why you might not ask clients for feedback, but they are the minority, not the majority. And I talk to marketing and BD directors that are almost sort of begging people around the business to let them send an annual piece of feedback, one piece of feedback. Now, if you're doing it sort of project based, it's a point in time, you know, it's the wrong time of year, this industry's busy and all the rest of it. But more often than not, it's back to that, just the fear. If the client comes back with stunning feedback, well, I knew I was doing a great job, so I haven't really benefited. And if they come back with anything that isn't stunning, then I look bad. So maybe I won't play and I'll let somebody else do it. And so it's not the right time. So there's a culture shift here at a very, very basic level of listening to clients in a way that is captured, because of course Fiona's talking to clients all the time. Of course they're listening about the work that they're doing and all the rest of it. But in terms of gathering anything broader about sort of signals about the relationship, the experience, future needs, the rest of it, there needs to be this sort of shift from it being an opt-in, I'll let you talk to my client, to an opt-out. And I fully appreciate that is far, 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 far easier said than done. And that's why this is a journey, not a switch. So what's the alternative path? The alternative path here is what we call always on client listening. And so it's basically the antithesis of these things. So rather than creating siloed projects, siloed data, everything is unified. So immediately you've got it in one place. You've got the knowledge in one place. You've got the data in one place, and you've got the ability to look through it and start seeing the story. The second bit of that is it goes from being a manual process to being automated. So it becomes opt-out rather than opt-in. It means that the data is being analyzed and reported automatically. So instead of your teams having to crunch data, build PowerPoint slides, they're doing the high value add stuff. They're doing the so what? What does this mean for us? What does this mean for our brand? What does this mean for our BD priorities? What does this mean for our account planning process? That's what you pay them for. That's what they want to be doing. And that's where they get to spend more time because the grunt work is automated. And then as a result, you go from this sort of point in time project based to real time, because now you've got that automation. All of a sudden, for example, the annual survey can be something that goes out annually. So each client gets it once a year, but they get it in the month that is most relevant to them. So it's a month when they've got the time to fill it in. So all of a sudden you get this drip, drip, drip of insights all the way through. Clients are more likely to respond because it's sent at a good time, but you're still only asking them once a year, that kind of thing. You get the ability on the real right, and we've got a client that has a client lens that's mobile. And so when they're going out visiting clients, they're able to sit in reception and have a quick look at it and go, what feedback have they shared? How's the experience going? What might I want to talk about? And they can see it all there. And equally, the client might be sitting at their desk going, oh, they're coming to see me in 5 minutes and I haven't done that survey they sent me. I'll do it now. Fill it in. Boom. Good. I've done it. I can tell them I've done it. And they go, ping. Oh, good. They've just replied to the survey and here's what they've told me. I've now got something for the conversation. So it changes the dynamic in terms of You don't have to make decisions based on assumptions, based on research that you had a while ago. Instead, you can say, well, what are clients telling us now, and how's that changing, and do we need to adapt to it? So this is what I mean by this sense of always listening. So whereas before we had end of matter survey, relationship survey there at the end of the client journey, the reality is the voice of the client is everywhere. It's coming through in lots of different places based on how the client wants to share it and when the client wants to share it. So if you make it easy for them to fill it out, easy for them to share feedback, then you can get all these little signals all the way along. So this isn't about sending lots and lots of big long surveys. On the contrary, all of our surveys are one page, not because our surveys are particularly good, but because if you're dipping in all the time, you only need to ask a few questions. And therefore, it's really, really quick for people. In some cases, it's 30 seconds and one question. But it also means you're picking up other signals like what you're getting internally from operational data, from staff, and you can start to balance the two. And that becomes powerful because often you have sort of client feedback over on one side, and then you have your internal teams that are talking over the water cooler or on Teams and Slack and things like that going, this doesn't work. This isn't broken. I have to do this extra work. It would be much better for clients if, and that becomes a squeaky wheel if it's on its own. But if you can put the two bits together and say, here's what clients are telling us, and here's what our people are telling us, actually, all of a sudden, you've got problem and solution on the same side. And it becomes a lot easier to build business case for continuous improvement and all the rest of it, because again, you're not siloed with your data anymore. The second one is that you can then start to think about having this unified voice of the client. So rather than source of data report, now all of a sudden you bring all the data in together, you analyze it, and then you can say, right, what do people need to know? So you can actually then say, right, well, what insights does the board need or the senior leadership team? Okay, we can now draw on the relevant bits of data and analysis in order to give them just the view that they need and nothing else. So you're not bombarding people with this fire hose of data. Instead, you're going, right, of all of this single source that we've got that's updating in real time, but that's all automated, what do people need to see? What does marketing need to see? Marketing needs to see how we're tracking in terms of our brand. Is what we're saying about our brand aligned with what clients actually experience? Because if it's not, we're not going to get the testimonials that support what we're saying in our pitch decks. BD might want to know, where are the emerging needs? What are clients talking about? What are their emerging priorities that we want to get ahead of, get the right partner, the right expert to talk to them, to be thinking about their needs? Client teams want to be able to see all the feedback that's been shared by that client with the context of maybe how does that compare to all of the clients in the sector or all the practice area clients? So all of a sudden you go, oh, that's really interesting. They rate us as a 3.5 for innovation, but all their peers rate us as a 2. So actually these guys are seeing some innovation that we're not seeing elsewhere, or vice versa. Everyone else is giving us a 5, they're giving us a 4. Maybe there's a gap with this client that we can now see because we've got context. So once you've got this automated analysis, once you've got this single source of truth, you can then start to think about things. I love quoting Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. So rather than starting with what's our data capture tool, what can we report on it? Instead, you start over on the right-hand side and say, what are the insights we need to know to make faster, more agile, more informed decisions? And then you work backwards to get the insights, which is a very different way of thinking, but it means that everything is geared around your decision making rather than geared around the data you can capture. And then sort of one step on from that is you can then start to think about this not as a straight line, but actually as a flywheel. So going around sort of from the orange going around clockwise, you get the sense if you're always listening, you then start to go, well, we can centralize the data. That now creates a real rich source of information for us. You automate the analysis. The value of the automation is not just the speed and the scale, but it's also the consistency, particularly when you then start saying, let's ask open questions. Let's not ask closed questions. Let's just say to clients, what do you need to tell us? What are we doing well? What can we do better? We're not going to prompt you. We're not going to give you a list of things to choose from. Instead, we're just going to let you tell us what's top of your mind. Well, the text analysis can do all of that, and all of a sudden you're coming out, but it's doing it consistently. I mean, I've spent, as you can imagine, a long time analyzing a lot of text data manually in old jobs and then to build out our products. And it's really hard, even for one person, to keep lots of concepts in your head. And it's really hard to consistently, day after day, week after week, analyze the same thing because it's all fuzzy. It's all fuzzy. It's all, it's human language. The AI is really consistent with it. Then the next bit, because you've got that automation, you've got that consistency, you can now start to give results context. You can benchmark. You can do real-time internal benchmarking. You can start to say, right, well, how does our brand compare across practice areas, across sectors, across jurisdictions? What are different types of clients saying? Do our high-value clients say something different from our low-value clients? And then you can focus on closing the loop because you haven't got lots of manual work in the first 4 stages. The human resource, the brain power, goes into the last bit, which is closing the loop. It's the, so what are we going to do? Let's drive action. Because often the client listening teams get disconnected from that because they're focusing on the capture and they get disconnected from the action. But instead, they've got time to drive the actions to communicate back to clients and go, hey, thanks very much for sharing that. Here's what we heard. Here's what we're doing about it. You can go out to all the clients that haven't shared feedback, tell them what you heard, and then you get that peer proof going along that says, well, maybe I should give you some feedback next time because clearly you're listening and it's making a difference. So maybe I'll share too. So that's where you start to get the feedback loop going. So just sort of final thing, and then I'll shut up and do the questions. But I thought this might be helpful just to see when you sort of apply this thinking to something that a lot of businesses do, how it works out. So we have some clients that do quarterly business reviews with their clients. So once a quarter, they meet with their client to kind of look at the various pieces of work they're doing, what's going well, what could do better. And historically, that's been the start of the data capture process. So we go along, we have this quarterly business review, and we get feedback from the client, and then we talk about it, and we try and get on to emerging needs and new priorities and future work. But instead, it becomes a loop. So what you can do is say, right through the project, right through the last 3 months, we can collect instant feedback, which is a very, very simple kind of, what do we do well? What do we do better? Get out of their way, make it really easy for them to share that. Or we can do informal feedback, gathering what we're hearing from the teams, what the teams are hearing from clients. Let's put all that in one place. At the end of the matter in this case, or just at the end of the quarter, you then go out to all the people on your side and say, how are we getting on? How do you think the project's going? How do you think the client's seeing value? What do you think's working? Has what we've put in place or changed in the past, is that making a difference? And then you can go out to the client's team, all the people that are working on it day to day, and say, right, let's gather your feedback up. You bring all that in, analyze it, and then you can say to the client, right, well, I can give you a summary of that before we have the conversation because it's all building up in real time. You can see it. Here's a summary. So you don't have to go and talk to all of your team. Instead, we've got this shared single source of truth. And so when we go and have that conversation, we're far more informed about how it's going, how the experience is going, what's changed since the last conversation. And it can be a lot more forward looking, a lot more action orientated, because it's not the point in the process where you get feedback. Of course, you can then analyze that as well. So you then obviously get some additional signals coming through from the interview transcript, but also what we've now seen firms doing is analyzing the actions that come out of these conversations. So it's not feedback, but it's a signal. And the reason they do that is because, and I'll be interested to see to what extent this resonates with the people on here. When I was at a managing partner event for law firms back before Christmas, and one of the big things on their mind was the fact that they were getting really frustrated that their firm couldn't broaden the relationship with clients. And worse, really good clients were going to their competitors for work that they could do. And when they went back to them and said, well, why have you done that? Why have you not, you didn't even talk to us about it and you've gone with them? And they go, well, I didn't know you did it. And they said, well, how do we get out of this? Well, if you start analyzing the actions that come out of these conversations, all of a sudden you go, oh, it's really interesting. 80% of the actions are me, the current lead, needs to send the client something. I need to send them a document, I need to send them a white paper. I need to follow up in 3 months' time. And only 5% are, I need to introduce, I need to share, I need to bring into the conversation, all those types of actions. So now you start to get evidence for, why aren't we doing this? Or we've got certain teams that are doing it, certain teams that aren't. And so you can then have a more informed conversation across fee earner groups, across client teams, across partner groups, to just say, right, well, we've got to change this because we're we're not making the revenue we could do, we're losing work from valuable clients, here's a really good example of how not only we can evidence it, but we can then track if we're doing things differently. So that hopefully is a tangible way of thinking about it that just starts to show when you think about feedback as this sort of flywheel rather than sort of projects, it creates a lot more insight and a lot more action for you. So this is sort of my last one, just in terms of some things to think about. So to make client listing more effective, to start thinking about it in terms of how it can drive competitive advantage, there's a few sort of perspectives. Dare I say, you need to look at things through a different lens. There's my corny line. It's about going from project-led to thinking about always on. Can we collect across more places? Now, of course, this is all a journey. It doesn't change overnight, but how do you just start to go, is there another touch point we can just start to collect some signals from? Are there ways that we can engage with the insights on a slightly more regular basis? And I've got an example of that next. How do we go from it being an opt-in culture to an opt-out? Have we got certain teams? We often talked about finding a champion. What's the team, even what's the individual that is happy to go first, is happy to put themselves out there, and you support them, you help them, and then you sing their praises from the rooftops and make them into a hero. And then that starts to create peer proof within the firm. That just sort of says, you know what? Yes, we'll go speak to all of my clients unless there's a reason for not doing it. How do you start going from static reporting to continuous conversations? And I've used the word conversations again because it just means, how do you start to keep that sort of voice of the client as a live conversation as opposed to something that lives in a PowerPoint deck once a year? So I'll give an example of that in a sec. And then the last one is around sort of decentralized to unified. So it doesn't mean that you've got to immediately jump into a big IT project. It might be that unified is just, we need to talk about as a firm how we're asking questions of our clients. Let's get a bit more consistency around that. Let's get a bit more consistency around where we put that data. Might still be in separate spreadsheets, but at least they're all in a shared folder. They're on the same section of SharePoint or whatever it is. So that sort of sense of unified can just start to grow. It's not a, you've got to buy a big database or anything. So here's my sort of final tip, which is this. When I do sort of customer experience keynotes, I talk about the idea of a CX minute, which I've shamelessly stolen from the health and safety industry. So in health and safety businesses, they have a safety minute at the beginning of every meeting where somebody talks about a safety example and why thinking about safety is important. And they're drawing on personal experiences, not necessarily even from the business. The reason they do that is to just set the tone that safety is vital to everything we now talk about. So to help shift the firm to being sort of client-led and being able to make client-led decisions, why not try the same thing? So have as a regular agenda item where somebody stands up and gives an example of good customer experience and how it makes a difference to their relationship with that brand, to what they buy, how they engage, how they talk about it. Doesn't even need to be about the firm. Can be some of your internal client stuff, but could just be people talking from the heart, people sharing it. It just starts to reinforce this sense of, if we listen to our clients and deliver things based on their needs in terms of experience, in terms of products, not just expertise, then it's going to help drive the business. So that's my, what could you do today? Probably not something you will do today, but it's a simple stepping stone that you could just start to go, right, let's do that, because then that starts some of those cultural shifts that helps you drive some of the process shifts that then sort of helps you make the shift. There we go. That is me. I'd love to hear your thoughts, what you're doing, where you disagree, questions about what I was talking about, anything at all.
Hi, Paul. Sunny here from South Africa. How are
Hi.
you?
Very well, thank you.
Good, great. Sorry, my camera is not on. But yeah, I just wanted to say very great presentation, very good insights. There were a lot of things that you said that I identified with, especially the constant communication with clients. For us, from our side, we obviously have, particularly with our consulting clients, whom we interact with more or less on a daily basis, as opposed to the audit side, where you basically see them probably once a year. So with
Yes.
those, we do have monthly management meetings. But something that I found to be quite useful with what you said is even with those monthly management meetings, you might find you're discussing, the same things month after month. And this was quite useful in that, it made me think about what other questions you can ask outside of just presenting the numbers and financials and things like that, speaking more, making it a little bit more broad. What's happening with your business? What's coming along? What are your plans? And I think it's only through that communication that you would be able to see what other value add there might be for yourself and for them as well regarding your service lines. So yeah, quite insightful. I 100% agree with you.
I think, yeah, that's a great observation. I think that would be a great step that would just open up a lot of new insights and ideas for people. Yeah.
That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah.
This is Marcus from Brazil.
Hey, Marcus.
Thanks for the presentation. Well, we usually I'm a partner over here, so usually we have the team speaking to the customers during the day. So sometimes what we feel as partners is it's a kind of insecurity when the team is really bringing to us the feedback from the client, and how do we make sure that this is something that they can, try to extract from the client and bring to us, and that become like an action plan or something that we can improve with our clients, because we are not every day with the client. So our team is doing that job usually. So how can we deal with that and get the best from our team to bring us that feedback?
Yeah, it's a great question and a common challenge. I think there's an interesting opportunity if you're not with the clients all the time, then that creates the little bit of distance from the day-to-day team where being able to just check in and ask. And I say my two favorite questions, all of this are kind of what's going well, or where are we exceeding expectations? So, ask about the high points, and then where can we support you better, or what needs improving? Again, word it to fit with your brand and comforts, but giving the clients the opportunity to tell both sides of the story then gives you it makes it feel more balanced. So when the feedback's coming in and being heard, it doesn't feel like it's just the negative things. And equally, sometimes clients, if they're thinking feedback, they immediately go looking for, well, here's the things that aren't working. And then that feels a bit odd for them because they're going, there's a whole lot of really great things that you're doing and I'm really enjoying, but you've asked for feedback, so I've almost ignored that. So I think giving them the chance to talk about both and giving partners in the team the chance to hear about both is really good. And then I think when you're sort of sharing that back internally, I would sort of over celebrate the positives to start with and focus on the fact that feedback can be positive. These are the great things clients are telling us about, particularly if it's new things that people have done where they've had some feedback, taken an action, and as a result, the client's noticed. I mean, that's absolute gold dust, and that's a great thing to share. And almost park the negatives and downplay, to collect them, but maybe don't make too much of them to start with, and get people comfortable with asking, because if the people that are with the client every day may fear being shot as the messenger when they have to go back, because also it feels like they're giving the feedback back to the partner and all the way. So if it can just be in that balance of this is what they said that was good, and it's just factual reporting at that point. And then if the partners will naturally want to gravitate to the positives and talk about the positives, and that sort of creates it. And then you can maybe slowly pick up the improvement areas through a different mechanism. And then people start to get more comfortable with it. It is hard because just as humans, we're ingrained to worry about giving feedback. So therefore our whole demeanor when we try and share it, even if it's somebody else's feedback, we're kind of almost braced for it, which makes the other person braced for it. And
well, the feeling that I have is I would like to speak to all the clients every day,
Yeah.
but that's not possible. And the other side, we got that bad feeling that we are not getting everything from the client. And sometimes you have the team, and sometimes the team is not comfortable to bring you all the problems, because sometimes they are involved with the issues, and might feel scared or concerned about bringing these things to the upper level. So that's my feeling. That's what I feel every day.
I think it's, I think what's interesting is when senior people go to clients and ask, how's it going? Clients really value that. And so just the process of doing it actually strengthens the relationship, regardless of what's said. And I wonder whether there might be, it's still not all of the clients, but if there's a stepping stone that says, right, I'm going to start doing 15-minute calls where I say to clients up front, tee them up. I'm phoning around a bunch of clients, 15 minutes. I've only got 2 questions for you. I want to know this and I want to know this. And you can record it and then just sort of go through it and have that and say, look, I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I just want to talk about the experience you're having, the future need, and then maybe is there one thing we can help you with that we're not at the minute, as a throwaway, and see what they say. And I reckon if you could even block in sort of 1 15-minute a week, that would start to build up a really nice evidence. And the reason I say record it is because you can then share it with somebody else to do the transcript. You can use sort of AI to summarize them and all these things now. There's lots of tools that do that. And so then it can sort of go beyond you, because the trouble with those conversations is you then go, right, now I've got to spend time writing up my notes and sharing them with people. So a 15-minute call is actually an hour's of work. If you record it, it's 15 minutes, move on, and somebody else can pick it up.
Thank you.
That's phenomenal. Sorry, I jump in, but Marcus, that's exactly the feeling we have with the network itself, because we'd like to listen to everyone every day, and we do spend a lot of times with conversations, but I think we often just hear the loudest voices, and we also hear things which confirm the biases we have. I think as well, I'd love to be able to come back from a conference and say to the members, this is what you thought, not send out a survey and say, what do you think? Because it's a different thing.
I always had that feeling that you are missing something,
But I'd like to say something about that. You talked about talking to your client 15 minutes a week. If I had to talk to all my clients 15 minutes, it take a month. And then for me, sometimes it's I have short time. Then I have to choose to one or another. I have to speak because of the emergency of the situation or something else. I don't know. But sometimes other one feel frustrated because I haven't time, because I only have 24 hours in a day, and I'm stuck in this situation. And it's not every time easy to find the good person, to choose the client who have to call, and that's a problem that I have. And sometimes the clients say, yeah, I don't hear you. I don't have, you don't call me back. You don't give me some news, but I'm working on the files, and I have to work too on the files.
That's right. Yes.
I have to work. And that's the biggest part. Then that's yeah, sometimes.
I think you've gone on mute, Sylvie. Can't hear you.
You lost my. Okay, sorry. Then I say sometimes it's not easy to find the good balance between the communication with the client, my work, and some rest too.
Yes, you're right, and you only have 24 hours in the day, and hopefully you're not having to work all of those 24 hours. So yes, it's very real. I think maybe another way would be, so we have some clients that have a link in their signature of the firm signature, so on everyone's signature, which links through to a form that just asks those 2 questions. What are we doing well? What could we do better? Nothing else on there, not ratings or anything else. And what they found is that in the context of working with clients, it feels weird to suddenly send them a survey in the middle of working with them, because it suddenly seems very formal and otherwise very natural two-way conversation. But what they found, the ability to just go, hey, don't forget, if you've got any broader feedback about our experience, there's always a link down the bottom. Yeah, anytime. So on every email, you can always find it. And that gentle nudge starts to help the client. If you haven't got the time to make those calls, even the 15-minute one, then that sort of is, we found firms are feeling that feels like a natural way of just prodding and reminding clients that they can just share something through that mechanism as well. So that might be something to think about as well, in terms of just make it really easy. And then you can just direct people and go, hey, don't forget, anytime you've got something to share that's a bit broader than the specifics of what we're doing, put it in there.
Mm. Yeah, but
It's
that's
hard.
thank
It's
you
hard.
for what you say. But that's when I talk to my clients, that's always what they say. What they feel about the communication. They say, yeah, have to wait 24 hours before you answer a mail. You have to I have to you are busy when I call. Yes, I'm on the phone. I'm talking to other clients. I'm managing the team, because I'm plus of my work. I'm manager of the team. Then
Yeah.
Sometimes I would like to have a clone.
Yeah. Yes. Yes,
It
that's
will be
right. Yeah.
easy. But yes, sometimes for me, I know that's my problem. But I cannot make a double of me. I would like.
And I think there's a lot of nodding even in this room. I think there's a lot of people feel the same pressure.
Yeah.
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 There's a pressure, and we want to satisfy our clients. I'm the first to want to do it, because I always find that the conversation is a privilege, and we have to. We are some as an accountant. I'm sort of the doctor, the psychologue of their company, of my client, and I have to understand his feeling, what he wants, his desire, who he wants to feel better with I'm gonna come to work with them in this on this path. But sometimes I cannot. It's not easy. It's not easy to satisfy everyone.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you. I had a question about where to get started, and maybe the idea is if a 15-minute a week. I call a client, ask 2 to 3 questions, and maybe and I like the idea about that potential form and an email signature. And do you have a software recommend for that solution, Paul? Or
I've been trying hard not to, but my customer lens does all that.
yeah, understood. Okay, gotcha.
So, but any sort of, it's basically the way it works would work with a lot of them is just it's just a hyperlink to a form that we've got embedded in, the Shoesmiths websites and places like that. You could do that with any simple form survey. The value of a platform like ours is it then all rolls up with the analysis. But to get started, we've got clients that just started by building out a form, linking it to the email, getting IT to make it sort of sit there automatically. And at least then you just start to capture the data. And then if the volume gets too big, then you can think about, well, how do we analyze it automatically?
Yeah, our firm is 36 years old. I've been here 27 years, and we don't gather feedback.
Okay.
And I couldn't even tell you how many clients we have. Thousands, enough to generate 15 million in revenue. Like we just, so there must be something scary there. So I think that's resonating, right? Like don't ask them. They might tell you what you don't want to hear, which you probably should hear, right? So I'm understanding that well too. I would say anecdotally, and I know Sylvie, what you're talking about is hours in the day problem is I really want to know what my best clients think, right? That's and I think over the years, one of my favorite questions is, how did my team do at the conclusion of an engagement, just to see what kind of feedback is. But I also think if I want to get my partners to do anything, I need to incentivize them. And so do you see this forming part of partner compensation metrics?
Oh, now that's a really interesting question, and a debate that I have with clients quite a lot. So I think there's two ways that firms think about compensating. One is the inputs, one is the outputs. So they might go down the route of, well, we just want to incentivize people to all go out and start collecting feedback. That can work really well. It can also be gamed. You know, so people will ask the same good client 4 or 5 times, or get somebody to fill it in, and the rest of it. But there is an opportunity to go, well, just as a starting point, let's just do that. There's also, firms talk about incentivizing the outputs, i.e. the scores that people get back. The risk with that is if they're the ones asking for feedback, again, it will be gamed because they'll only ask the happy clients, and we have the same challenge. So, and you also get that situation where we've all been into retail stores and somebody says, well, you know, can you fill out this survey when they send it to you? And by the way, anything less than 9 and I won't be able to feed my children this week, and all the rest of it. And they, you know, they kind of make you want to give a score, which is fine, but it means you lose the value in it. So I would say in the short term, the incentives are around maybe celebrating the positive. So it's not quantitative, but it's more just, this is some great feedback we've had. Let's celebrate them. Let's call them out. Let's have awards for great customer experience or great customer service. Who's getting the most sort of name drops in referrals and testimonials, and that becomes a bit easier, that you can sort of manage it and go, well, this person's always sending it out just to their happiest clients, so we'll celebrate them sometimes, and sometimes just go somewhere else. So so that's a way of doing it. It also just builds confidence that feedback's about positivity, not negativity. So I think that's a good way to start. Other incentives that firms have found work well is peer pressure. So, you know, kind of starting to publish here's how many bits of feedback, and here's the praise we've had about certain practice areas, certain teams, certain offices, or whatever else.